Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In this week's video I'm in the Festiniog region in the Slate Mountains in Wales, and I thought I'd show it to you and explain to you how I make time lapses. Now, time lapses are really good pieces of work to put in your vlog, for example, or you can use them as a standalone piece of work, and I think they look really good and they capture basically what's happening with the weather and the environment that you're in. So the main thing about time lapses is you're going to be taking obviously several images and putting them together afterwards in a video file. Now, for a time lapse I like to do normally about 10 seconds worth of time lapse, and you'll be shooting at 24 frames per second. So you're going to need 240 images to produce 10-second time lapse, because you're shooting for 24 images for 1 second of time lapse. So if you wanted to do a 20-second time lapse, you'd obviously need 480 images and so on. Now, the main thing you need to do when shooting a time lapse is make sure your camera is in manual mode on everything. You do not want anything shifted or selected by the camera between images, so that each shot is exactly the same as you're going through your time lapse. Otherwise, when you put it together, you'll have different sort of focusing points, you'll have different exposures, different white balances, etc. So the first thing I like to do once I've got it set up on the tripod is basically get my composition set up and pick a focus point, focus on that thing, and then put the camera and the lens into manual focus. This will mean the camera's not going to hunt around between images, and the focus point is going to be on the exact same thing throughout the whole time lapse. The next thing is obviously the white balance. Again, you don't want that on auto white balance. You want to select one for the situation that you're in. So today I want it on sunny, because obviously it's quite sunny out now. The next thing will be the manual mode. Again, the ISO, the aperture and the shutter speed. You want to be able to select all those before you start shooting, and you want it to be constant through each photograph as you're taking it. Also, make sure you're in obviously RAW, so that you can obviously have the full adjustment possible once you've got it into Lightroom. So the next thing you're going to need is an intervalometer. Some cameras have these built in, but you've just got to be careful with that, because the camera will actually produce the time lapse and put it straight into a video file for you, but it won't allow you to do anything afterwards, or very little adjustments afterwards. Whereas if you do this where you're shooting individual images, then you'll be able to take it into Lightroom and have the full sort of raw file adjustments that you can do in Lightroom and Photoshop, and apply that through your whole time lapse. So once you've done this, you'll need an intervalometer, and that'll basically tell your camera when to open the shutter, how long for, and for how many times. Now, I'm going to be shooting about 240 images here, so I'm going to put 240 into the intervalometer, and because my scene is moving quite slowly, the clouds, I'm going to be basically using about a 3-second gap between each exposure. Now, depending on how fast your subjects are moving, so if you're doing water or traffic or something like that, you'd obviously use a quicker shutter speed, maybe like 1 second between each shot, and this will allow for a nice smooth time lapse. You don't want any sort of juddering if there's a big gap between each image as the people or things move in the scene. So I'm going to put this on the tripod now and get everything set up, and then I'm going to put the intervalometer on the camera, set it going. Okay, now I'll put a quick image on the screen of what the composition is that I've gone for. Basically show you how I import the images into Lightroom and edit them, and then take them into Photoshop to put them into a time lapse, and then export it and render as a video file, and I'll put that at the end of the video. So as you can see, I've got all the images into Lightroom now, and you just need to select one of your images and do the edit that you want to do. This will depend obviously on your time lapse that you want to produce and your image and things and your own style, so do your edits to however you want. Once you've done that, basically you want to select all the images in your timeline right to the end, and then you want to click sync. So make sure all these boxes are checked. Now we can obviously do the check all there, that'll turn everything on, and then basically click synchronize. Now I've done this already, but that then will apply all the settings through every single image that you want to put in your time lapse with the settings that you've done in the original edit. Apply those all the way through. So once it's basically applied that, which will take a couple of minutes just to sort of do that, you can go up to File and into Export. Now in this top part here, you just need to basically choose your destination folder where you're going to put all your JPEGs, and then in this second section here, this is the most important part, you need to make sure from this menu you tick the custom name and sequence, and this will basically allow you to name what each image is going to be called. So in this case, Mountains TL. More importantly, it's going to assign a number to each photograph. Now some people use a single number 1 like that to start off. Now I found there's been a few problems with how Photoshop basically takes that sequence in. I think it likes to have basically the same number of characters within each photograph, so because I've got over 100, I'm going to need at least 3 characters, so I always start it off at 101 for the first image, and then the next image will be 102, 103, etc. I just think it works better with 3 characters in the number sequence. So I'll give you an example there, Mountains TL 101.jpg, and then basically 102, 103, and so on. Everything else you can just leave the same, just make sure obviously the quality is at 100% and everything else is fine. Click export, and that'll basically take a while just to convert all your raw files into JPEGs, and you can take them then into Photoshop. So if I just go to the file there and show you that, you can see there we've got all the images there, so it's 101, 102, 103, and they're all in the sequence ready to be put into the timeline. So if we then go into Photoshop and click File and Open, we can then select the first image in the sequence, which is 101, and then importantly you need to click this image sequence there, and that'll tell Photoshop that all the files within this folder are for a sequence, and to sort of import them in going by the numbers on each individual photograph and keep them in that order. So if you click open, it'll bring up the frame rate, so you can obviously pick whatever frame rate you're after. In this case I did 24, so like I said in the video, for 1 second's worth of time lapse you basically need 24 images or 24 frames. So if you want to do a 10-second time lapse, you'll need 240 images. So click OK there, and then that basically turns it into one long layer that contains all the individual images across there. You can play that within the timeline, and then that's obviously your time lapse. So you can obviously leave this as it is and just export it like that, but for better quality I like to turn it into a 4K file. So we go to canvas size and change this to 4K, so it's 3840 by 2160 pixels. Click OK. It's going to be the canvas is basically going to be smaller than what the image is at the moment, so what that's saying is it's just going to be smaller. So you can just click proceed. As you can see there, the canvas has shrunk, but the image obviously is still quite large, so you can only see a small portion. We're going to resize the image so that it fits the canvas, so you can press Ctrl and T, and that'll turn into a smart object. And obviously you can just resize that now. It still is a little bit big, but that's fine. Click enter, and you can just get the move tool and move it around. So if you want more sky, you could do that. More of the foreground, you could do that. So what I like to do is put a little bit of movement in your time lapse. Obviously you can do this in the field if you've got a slider, but I don't have a slider, so I'm going to basically do it here in post-production. So we'll start off there with having quite a bit of foreground, and then we'll move it up so it's focusing more on the clouds in the sky. So we can do this by going to this menu here, go to transform, and this creates a little keyframe there telling Photoshop that we want the image to start here, and then we can move it along the timeline to basically where we want to finish the movement, which in this case will be the end. And then we can move the image on the canvas to where we want it to finish, which will be there. Obviously incorporating more sky, and you can see that it's created another keyframe. So that's basically telling Photoshop where it's going to end that movement. So if we move it back, you should be able to see it moving. Obviously I'm screen recording here, so it's quite slow. You get the idea with that. Then you can, once you're happy with that, you can export the file and then render it as a video. So give it a name there, whatever you want to call it, destination folder. And keep all the settings the same, but you just need to be aware that this is basically the 4K that we've set previously. This is the dimensions, the pixels of the document size there. That's just basically saying that it's in 4K. You click render, and then that'll render it and you'll have a finished video.